Is former WWE Executive Chairman and CEO Vince McMahon planning a WWE return? We're going to let you know all of the details and the timeline of a possible return to TKO and by proxy WWE for McMahon in this 365 Deep Dive. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of professional wrestling. And right now, a lot of people are talking about a potential return to WWE/TKO Group Holdings for Vince McMahon. Now, to this day, McMahon does remain a key stockholder in TKO, though his amount of shares that he owns is not as big as it once was. But recently, McMahon has started to make more public appearances. More senior figures in WWE have started to be more associated with McMahon, leading to speculation that despite all of the scandals and ongoing lawsuits against the former honcho of WWE, he could be set for a spectacular return to the company that he turned into a multi-billion-dollar juggernaut throughout his career. Now, let's get into this and really go back all the way to the beginning, because you've got to when it comes to Vince McMahon, and talk about his original departure from WWE. Now, cast your minds back, of course, to the summer of 2022. It was then that bombshell articles from the Wall Street Journal were released, revealing that the then WWE CEO and Executive Chairman Vince McMahon had agreed to pay $12 million in hush money to 4 women, and several allegations of sexual misconduct and worse were made to him about him at the time, and it led to this big scandal, a big investigation from independent board of directors in WWE. The pressure and the scrutiny was very much on. Now, again, it came out at the time that more than $12 million and more over the past sort of 16 years at the time were actually paid to suppress allegations of sexual misconduct and infidelity, an amount far larger than was actually previously known. Now, at the time, and even more would come out after the fact, but at the time, the payouts, according to the Wall Street Journal, and this was a litany of allegations and articles coming out about McMahon, the payouts went to 4 women. They were all formerly affiliated with WWE. They signed agreements with Mr. McMahon that prohibited them from discussing potential legal claims against or their relationship with, at the time, over 70-year-old executive. Now, the previously unreported settlements included the likes of a $7.5 million pact with a former wrestler who alleged that Mr. McMahon had coerced her into giving him oral sex at the time, demoted her, and ultimately declined to renew her contract in 2005. Now, the wrestler and her attorney approached Mr. McMahon in 2018 and negotiated the payment in return for a silence, people familiar with the matter said. Now, at the time, people in WWE may have or may not have known about this. One thing's for sure, these payments were not reported by WWE, and it led to more investigations from the SEC. And with this, these allegations were coming out. McMahon started just to randomly appear on WWE television. He appeared on SmackDown and Raw in opening segments of the show, didn't really say all that much, and was trying to turn a negative story into publicity, into people watching the television program, which people at the time were creatively bashing, saying that it was not good as it once was, McMahon was out of touch, and that he needed to retire. Stunningly, in the wake of these allegations, that's exactly what McMahon did. This now infamous tweet came out from the Vince McMahon Twitter account on July 22nd, 2022. This is, at the time, just a couple of weeks, to be specific, 14 days after the first bombshell article came out from the Wall Street Journal. It infamously says, quote, "At 77, time for me to retire. Thank you, WWE Universe. Then, now, forever together. Hashtag WWE, hashtag thankful." Now, there was a bit of maneuvering and repositioning at the time. People had different kind of roles then in WWE, and lots of people were wondering what this meant when it comes to WWE, what this meant to his career, what this meant to the structure of the company itself. And at the time, this was said to be a voluntary stepping down as chairman and CEO of WWE. This was pending an internal investigation, and his daughter, Stephanie McMahon, was named as the interim CEO and the interim chairwoman of the WWE. Stephanie McMahon had just a few sort of weeks/months prior to this said that she was taking a leave of absence, and lots of people were putting connections together saying, was this related to what was going on with Vince McMahon at the time? Now, when he stepped down, initially, McMahon continued to oversee WWE creative and content development, but then, as I mentioned in July, he officially announced his retirement from WWE. He named his daughter, Stephanie McMahon, the company's new permanent chairwoman and co-CEO alongside Nick Khan. Triple H, Paul Levesque, then replaced Vince McMahon as head of WWE creative, and many wondered, was this really it? We'd always heard that McMahon, he would never retire, and the only time he would leave WWE is when he was dead, and he certainly wasn't dead just yet. But for a few months there, people thought, wow, this is really a post-Vince McMahon WWE. Well, it didn't take long for Vince to return. In fact, he returned as early as January 6th, 2023, just about 6 months or so after he retired, he was back. The Wall Street Journal reported that McMahon was planning a return to WWE as executive chairman ahead of upcoming media rights negotiations in 2024, and was also going to explore a potential sale of the company. On January 6th, WWE published a filing with the SEC appointing Vince McMahon by himself because he was still the largest shareholder in the company. He still had all the power in the company despite being retired. Now, he was appointed by himself. He then appointed George Barrios, Michelle Wilson, staunch McMahon soldiers in WWE, back to the WWE board of directors. On January 10th, McMahon assumed the role of executive chairman of WWE. This then led to Mr. McMahon actually selling WWE. He did exactly what he was planning to do. Despite the board of directors, meanwhile, when he was initially returning to WWE in January, all voting unanimously against having him back, he overruled them and overpowered them anyway, and several board of directors left or were told to leave because McMahon was back. Now, on April 3rd of 2023, Endeavor Group Holdings announced a deal under which WWE would merge with Ultimate Fighting Championship, the UFC, to form a new publicly traded company under the symbol TKO. Endeavor held a 51% stake in TKO, with WWE shareholders having a 49% stake, valuing WWE at $9.3 billion. McMahon was to serve as the executive chairman of TKO and would oversee new companies' WWE and UFC divisions. Upon completion of the deal, McMahon was expected to personally own 34% of TKO Group. Now, this merger, as mentioned, was announced in July, and it was completed later on that year, specifically on September 12, 2023, with WWE and UFC continuing to operate as separate divisions of TKO by focusing on professional wrestling and mixed martial arts, respectively. Now, on October 15th, it was announced that Endeavor Group Holdings CEO Ari Emanuel made the call to remove WWE's creative power from McMahon and actually had granted the responsibility to Triple H to drive what was described as 99.9% of the creative moving forward. As a result, it was said at the time that McMahon was no longer involved in the WWE creative direction of the company. But many were skeptical on this, considering that if McMahon was involved with TKO and he was still previously overseeing the WWE division, there's no way he wouldn't pick up the phone to his son-in-law or work remotely and phone in creative changes as he had done since returning to WWE in January of 2023. And there had been rumors and rumblings about sort of creative back and forth and posturing between McMahon and Levesque about creative decisions and the creative direction of WWE. Despite Ari Emanuel seemingly given the keys of creative power to Triple H, there was still this feeling that if Vince McMahon wanted to, he could still overpower Levesque in key creative decisions. So Vince was still the puppet master pulling the strings, and Triple H was more of a creative face of the company at the time. Well, during this time as well, this is when McMahon had to leave WWE and TKO for a second time, and this time seemingly permanently. On January 26, 2024, this was just days before WWE's Royal Rumble PLE, one day after a report about alleged sexual assaults committed by McMahon was published by the Wall Street Journal. Deadline confirmed that McMahon had resigned from TKO. In a statement, he said the decision was made out of respect for the WWE Universe, TKO shareholders, and business partners. As I mentioned, he was accused of sexual abuse and sex trafficking in a lawsuit by former WWE employee Janelle Grant. It was an absolute bombshell lawsuit filed in the U.S. District Court of the District of Connecticut, naming McMahon, WWE, and former head of talent relations John Laurinaitis as defendants. During the same lawsuit as well, it was revealed that an unnamed former WWE champion, UFC champion, which the Wall Street Journal actually revealed later to be Brock Lesnar, had also been used in an effort to actually have Grant trafficked to him as part of negotiations to sign a new WWE contract. The lawsuit alleges, and it's still ongoing at the time recording this video, that McMahon, Laurinaitis, and WWE violated the Trafficking Victims Prevention Act and includes claims of civil battery and intentional infliction of emotional distress in relation to years-long sexual and emotional abuse Grant said she endured as an employee of WWE. Now, later on, way down the line, Laurinaitis would be removed from this lawsuit as he began to cooperate with Grant and her attorneys, providing them with information on McMahon and WWE. As I mentioned, this lawsuit at the time recording this video is still ongoing. McMahon and WWE have filed motions to move this to private arbitration, citing private arbitration clauses in Grant's NDA that she signed with McMahon. However, Grant says that Vince McMahon didn't actually pay all of the NDA as was written in it, therefore it's null and void, therefore she can take this to actual court. Now, as I mentioned, when it comes to all of this, after this lawsuit, McMahon, he later resigned from the TKO board. There was a 24-hour period where it looked like he was going to try and stick it out despite this lawsuit. However, WWE key sponsors started to pull their sponsorship from shows. Namely, Slim Jim revealed that they were going to pull their sponsorship from the Royal Rumble PLE that was set to take place when all of this was going on. It was a major sponsorship for WWE, and they cited their uncomfortability with these allegations made against McMahon, and they said they just couldn't sponsor it. So therefore, McMahon resigned as executive chairman of TKO Group on Friday, just again hours before the Royal Rumble PLE. This came after he was named in this lawsuit filed by Janelle Grant that he sexually abused her and trafficked her to others inside World Wrestling Entertainment. So McMahon, in a brief memo to staff on the Friday before the Royal Rumble, WWE President Nick Khan said McMahon will no longer have a role at TKO Group or WWE. And then after that, it was a feeling of, well, he can't force his way back in. Previously, when he had retired, he could force his way back in. He was the largest shareholder in WWE. Therefore, when he wanted to come back at the beginning of 2023, despite the board of directors saying, Vince, we don't want you to come back, we don't think it's a good idea for you to come back, it really didn't matter because he had all the voting power. He had all of the power. He was the largest shareholder. He could do what he wanted. That wasn't the case this time around. In TKO, he's not the biggest shareholder in that company. So even if he did want to come back and do what he did before, leave, and then come back at a later date when the heat died down, he couldn't actually vote himself in if he wanted to. Therefore, McMahon started to sell quite a lot of TKO shares to the likes of Endeavor Group and others. He sold a huge amount of stock, and actually it got to a point where he now owns about 3% of TKO, which is still significant. Certainly it is still a significant amount, but certainly way different from the 30% that he previously owned in the company. And many thought McMahon was selling all of this because he was expected to sell a lot anyway, but retain a lot of control, still be executive chairman at the company. But after his exit from TKO and WWE, there was this feeling that he was selling the majority of his stock. He was going to invest it in another company, perhaps. In addition to that, he was building somewhat of a war chest because he was being named in a lot of other lawsuits and had a lot of investigations into him and his conduct throughout his tenure within WWE. One example comes with a lawsuit filed in 2024, specifically October of 2024, in which Vince McMahon and WWE were accused of allowing rampant sexual exploitation of young boys by announcer Mel Phillips in a new lawsuit regarding the ring boy scandal of the 1980s and 1990s. It was a case was where McMahon, his wife Linda McMahon, World Wrestling Entertainment, its parent company TKO, were accused of allowing open and rampant abuse of so-called ring boys as young as 12 who acted as assistants to ringside announcer Melvin Phillips Jr. in the 1980s and 1990s. Again, that lawsuit is still ongoing. In addition to that, he also had to reach a deal with the SEC over these original sexual misconduct claim settlements. Part of the problem here was that McMahon did not disclose these payments. Therefore, the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, they were investigating McMahon and WWE. Now, as I mentioned, in January of this year, 2025, the Securities and Exchange Commission said that they had settled charges against former World Wrestling Entertainment CEO Vince McMahon over his failure to disclose the sports entertainment company's board and others, that he had signed 2 settlement agreements worth $10.5 million with 2 women in order for them not to reveal potential claims against WWE. Now, of course, this was going back to the original articles back in 2022 that we spoke about. The SEC said that one agreement was signed in 2019, another was signed in 2022. One agreement required McMahon to pay a former employee $3 million in exchange for the former workers' agreement to not disclose her relationship with McMahon and her release of potential claims against the WWE and McMahon. The other agreement obligated McMahon to pay a former WWE independent contractor, likely this wrestler, $7.5 million in exchange for the independent contractor's agreement to not disclose her allegations against McMahon and her potential release of claims against WWE and McMahon, the SEC said. Now, the commission said that by McMahon not disclosing the agreements to WWE's board, legal department, accountants, financial reporting personnel, or auditor, it circumvented WWE's system of internal accounting controls and caused material misstatements in the company's 2018 and 2021 financial statements. So, again, because of all of this, there were all of these investigations coming out to McMahon as well as criminal ones, resulting in all of these allegations made against him. Now, earlier this year, in February of this year, federal prosecutors had dropped their criminal probe into Vince McMahon. According to his lawyer, that was the case anyway. Federal prosecutors ended their criminal investigation into whether Vince McMahon tried to cover up allegations of sexual misconduct with multiple employees. This is what his lawyer said anyway. He said, quote, "We have been consistent in communication with the government and understand with no ambiguity that the investigation has definitively concluded and will not result in charges." Now, this was first posted by the New York Post. This investigation's apparent termination comes less than a week after a grand jury and federal appeals court examined whether former WWE CEO McMahon committed a crime in hiding these allegations of sexual misconduct from 2 former female employees whom he allegedly paid more than $10 million in exchange for signing NDAs. So, this is again why he was expected to be building this war chest, selling his stock because he was having to settle with the SEC. He could possibly be facing criminal allegations, grand jury subpoenas. Now, once these kind of things had been moved on, again, they're still ongoing at the time of recording this video, but once these things had gone, people wondered what was next for McMahon. Well, seemingly what was next for him was founding a new company. Not a professional wrestling company, but a company called 14th and I. Now, this, according to trademark filings at the time, etc., 14th and I, which is a reference to the Capital Wrestling Foundation, which was on the corner of 14th and I back in the 1950s and 60s. He established McMahon this 14th and I company. It was described as an investment firm and, quote, entertainment hub company pursuing opportunities in media and sports entertainment. Now, you can actually see McMahon in these offices, seemingly for 14th and I, during a recent tribute that aired on Fox. It was produced by TMZ to the late WWE Hall of Famer Hulk Hogan. So, with McMahon starting to do these more public appearances, when he's been spotted more often, he's been doing more interviews, he's been in the 14th and I offices, and he's settled some of these lawsuits, some of these allegations against him. Not all of them, including the critical one that led him to leaving WWE in the first place, the Janelle Grant lawsuit. Many people wondered, is he on his way back into the public eye of things? Well, this is when speculation has really started to build up because Brock Lesnar is now back in WWE. As I mentioned, Brock Lesnar was named in that Janelle Grant lawsuit that back in 2024 caused McMahon to resign from TKO and WWE. Critically, he is not a defendant in the lawsuit. Unlike McMahon and WWE, Lesnar is not a defendant. Lesnar is someone that's just been named in it. Initially, he was this unnamed former WWE and UFC champion. Then, in an amended version of the lawsuit, he was actually named outright. With Lesnar being back on WWE TV, it's led to speculation that maybe Vince could come back, because when this lawsuit first came out in January of 2024, Lesnar was pulled from everything WWE and effectively has been put on ice ever since. He was meant to appear at the Royal Rumble just days after that lawsuit was filed. He was pulled. He was meant to appear at Elimination Chamber in Perth, Australia. He was pulled. He was meant to appear at WrestleMania 40 in a match against Gunther. He was pulled from that. He was meant to appear in the WWE 2K video game. He was pulled from that. And really, any mention of him on WWE TV was largely banned, prohibited. Occasionally you would have slight references, but not that much. Now, with Lesnar being back, there was this feeling, well, WWE and WWE legal, TKO legal, had seemingly cleared Lesnar, at least Lesnar to be acceptable to be back on WWE TV. There's maybe a feeling of optimism from WWE and TKO that this lawsuit is going to go into private arbitration, or at the very least, Lesnar being back on WWE TV isn't going to hurt them in this lawsuit, which has naturally led to a lot of speculation that with Lesnar coming back, well, maybe then Vince can come back. Now, Dave Meltzer said the following on Wrestling Observer Radio. He said, quote, "I wouldn't be surprised. I just got a thing from TKO 2 to 3 days ago about Vince's stock and everything. They want to make moments. I think that Brock shows them what the reaction would be to Vince, and it'll be a tough one to do, and I don't think he will ever be put back in charge of creative. That I don't expect, but I mean, he's not going to be back until this lawsuit is settled, okay? And he may never be back. He should never be back." Now, there has been some even more speculation that maybe he's been back all along and he's got people acting on his behalf, specifically Bruce Pritchard. Now, Ronda Rousey has kind of floated this theory about Pritchard and his role in WWE. Of course, Pritchard is heavily involved in WWE Creative. He's the executive director of WWE, which means really there's Paul Levesque, Triple H, who oversees and controls creative in the company, but a spot down from him is Bruce Pritchard. Bruce Pritchard sits in Gorilla and runs WWE shows with Triple H every single week. When Triple H isn't there, Bruce Pritchard largely runs the show. Now, an example here of conspiracy theories or what have you comes from Ronda Rousey. When she was doing interviews in 2022 to promote her upcoming book, she spoke about Bruce Pritchard. She said, quote, "Bruce Pritchard, another Vince McMahon crony. If what did you say you do here was a person, it would be him." No one knew exactly what his job was or how he got it. He was the type of guy who carries a briefcase just so it looks like he's doing something. Yet somehow he'd wormed his way up to executive producer, handpicked by Vince McMahon, because he knew Bruce was the kind of guy you could control from a distance through an earpiece. So the suggestion was from Ronda Rousey that really he was kind of this avatar kind of figure. And whilst Vince wasn't there in person when he was in charge of WWE, when he came back in 2023, he was effectively, Vince was telling Bruce what to say, what to do, and then Bruce would do it. Vince's fingerprints could be all over the show. Despite Vince not even technically being involved in WWE now, there's a feeling that maybe he could still have his fingerprints on the show through Bruce Pritchard. And of course, Paul Levesque is his son-in-law, so there's a familial connection there as well. And more of this comes from recent pictures of Vince McMahon. Now, recently, in the last sort of month or so, it was reported that former WWE chairman Vince McMahon was spotted in public, and he was spotted in public with who? Bruce Pritchard. He was seen leaving a New York City restaurant alongside the likes of current WWE executive Bruce Pritchard, as well as WWE Hall of Famer John Bradshaw Layfield, and former WWE executive Gerald Briscoe. So there was a suggestion that, well, Bruce is still clearly close to Vince. He's still clearly a very close ally and friend of Vince. So there could be a situation where actually he's talking to him about WWE and Vince can still control things through someone like Bruce Pritchard and maybe others. And actually, just to show what his standing is like with several key people within WWE still, comes from all of the fallout of Vince McMahon's 80th birthday party. Once again, people are now saying, are people happy to be associated with Vince McMahon once more? Previously, they weren't actually happy to be associated with him, but now they are, because several WWE stars were revealed to be in attendance at Vince McMahon's 80th birthday party. Now, it had been reported that names like The Undertaker, his wife Michelle McCool, Kane, John Cena, Gerald Briscoe, Sergeant Slaughter, his son Shane McMahon, R-Truth, were all in attendance. Now, actually, a picture was leaked of this from Jerry Lawler. Pictures weren't allowed to get out because, again, being associated with Vince McMahon can lead to a lot of backlash. But Jerry Lawler put out a picture which showed the likes of Lawler himself, WWE Ambassador Titus O'Neil, who once was suspended by McMahon for 60 days for pulling him just as Raw was going off the air, Sheamus, Drew McIntyre, high-profile WWE superstar still within the company, The Miz, Maurice, again, high-profile WWE superstars within the company, all there, black ties on, and suited and booted for McMahon's party, leading a lot of people to realize, actually, there might be a lot of people within WWE that are still very friendly with Vince and still are on very good terms and may even want him back in WWE. Several people that, like Drew McIntyre, are having the best runs of their careers without Vince McMahon at the moment. It certainly makes you think and makes you question. You can see McMahon also as well right there arriving and being actually, in his 80th birthday party, once again, suited and booted. So it's led to a lot of speculation once more about him going, who else was there? Who else was in attendance? Now, a lot more has come courtesy of Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select, who says that a number of WWE superstars were in attendance, among them Undertaker, John Cena, JBL, Sheamus, Drew McIntyre, The Miz, Titus O'Neil, Drew McIntyre, Maurice, Bruce Pritchard. Now, Sapp notes that nobody they spoke to was willing to speak on the record, again, to show us how much of a hot button topic this is, only on background, but they say they did speak to a number of people who attended, were invited, or heard about the process. Now, WWE talent that Fightful spoke to weren't surprised there were so many present WWE superstars there. One who spent a lot of time working with McMahon told Fightful, quote, "A lot of people here still feel like they owe Vince something, even though he made his money back on them tenfold." Another talent who didn't attend the event said there are, in fact, a number of talent who want to see the court situation involving Janelle Grant play out before deciding to ever sever ties, as they'd want if the shoe was on the other foot, saying they're giving him the benefit of the doubt and they're seeing where this one goes. Now, as I stressed, McMahon and WWE are currently being sued for sexual assault, sex trafficking, and harassment, as well as for the alleged violation of a non-disclosure agreement. As we spoke about earlier on in this video, McMahon settled with the SEC for over $1.7 million regarding these hush money agreements, while the civil assault case continued. John Laurinaitis was also sued, but he was dropped in exchange for agreeing to provide evidence in support of Grant's claims against McMahon. The party itself was intended to be kept very private, with nobody speaking about the event whatsoever until the photos emerged, to the point nobody would have known about it if the photos weren't even leaked. Attendees were encouraged to be photographed by a professional photographer who was on scene if they wanted photos for the event. Now, that's why Jerry Lawler actually posted the photo himself. He was asked by a number of people reportedly to delete it afterwards, which he did. One person in contact with Lawler said that Lawler is ride or die for Vince McMahon, and that wouldn't change. While nobody would name who, Fightful Select say they have been told there were a number of other current WWE talent that were there. However, there were many more that claimed they were invited and didn't go, and others who couldn't have been able to go regardless because they had to travel overseas for the current WWE European tour. Cena, who was there, has remained close to McMahon over the last few years, going to dinner with him, and he's spoken regularly about his feelings regarding McMahon. Fightful were told Pritchard and JBL have remained in contact with McMahon over the years. There was one person who was there who said it was the first time they or many others had seen McMahon in person in over 2 years, since the infamous Raw after WrestleMania in 2023, when McMahon was back in the gorilla position, changed much of the script of the show at the last minute, and was cited as one of the most worst episodes of Raw in recent years. Another person in attendance claimed they were there briefly, and they, along with others, had to catch flights to Europe for WWE's tour. Fightful say they spoke with a number of people who both went and didn't go if there was any moral conflict in doing so. Even one said that there was this kind of conflict that was there, but didn't elaborate on what went into the decision to attend. Of those who didn't attend that Fightful spoke to, the consensus was if they were accused of doing the things McMahon was, he would have fired them and never spoken to them again. Therefore, that's what they're doing. A person in attendance who said it was the first time they'd seen him in years said McMahon looked 80 before elaborating that McMahon seemed more frail, walked slower, and looked his age in a manner they hadn't seen in decades before leaving WWE. Now, Fightful say they've had people publicly ask if Bryan Danielson was there, as he supported McMahon in the past. He wasn't. Triple H, Stephanie McMahon, Nick Khan were not there, and Fightful were told there was no official WWE involvement. There were talent that asked if they could or should attend and were told by a WWE higher-up that it was their business. Now, Fightful do stress here, and this kind of rounds out this video, there is no talk of McMahon returning to WWE in any capacity at this point. Sources at the top of WWE claim to Fightful that they have no desire to bring him back, and there have been no discussions regarding McMahon contributing in a creative capacity. There was also a sculpture of his head. A TikTok also emerged revealing Michael Cole, Booker T, Teddy Long, and Dave Kapoor, also known as Ranjan Singh, in attendance. And yes, officials are officially saying they'd never want him back, but they didn't want him back before, and he still returned. So the question is Vince McMahon playing this big master plan? Does he have this big master plan for a return to WWE? This has been a deep dive. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your opinions. Is McMahon coming back at some point? Do you expect to see him back? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe. Bottom right hand corner. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.